The parking garage at midnight is its own universe. Concrete and shadows merge into a labyrinth where footsteps echo like whispers from another world. The fluorescent lights flicker with sickly pallor, casting more darkness than illumination. It's in places like these where the membrane between what we understand and what lurks beyond grows dangerously thin. I've been watching her for weeks now. The routine never changes. She emerges from the service elevator at 11:47 p.m., keys already in hand, walking briskly toward the same blue sedan parked in Section D. Her heels click against concrete, the sound bouncing off the walls like a metronome counting down to our inevitable meeting. Tonight would be different. Tonight, I would finally speak to her. My palms grew slick with sweat as I crouched behind a concrete pillar. My heart hammered against my ribs with such force, I feared she might hear it from across the garage. The security camera in the corner had been disabled days ago, a simple task for someone with my technical background. No one monitored these feeds anyway. The mall's security was laughably negligent. The service elevator chimed. My mouth went dry. She appeared exactly on schedule, her silhouette emerging from the yellow light of the elevator. I adjusted my position, feeling the cold concrete against my fingertips as I steadied myself. Something felt different tonight, a pressure in my ears, a static electricity that made the hairs on my neck stand on end. I counted her footsteps, 37 from elevator to car, always 37. I'd memorized the rhythm of her walk, the way she slightly favored her right leg, how her shoulders hunched forward when she was tired. Did she know how vulnerable she was? How exposed? My breathing came faster now. 20 steps, 15, 10. As she reached her car, I moved. My legs carried me forward with a confidence I didn't recognize. The fluorescent light above her vehicle flickered, momentarily casting us both in darkness. When it sputtered back to life, I was standing directly behind her. She sensed me before seeing me. Her body stiffened, keys fumbling between her fingers. When she turned, her eyes widened with primal recognition of danger. Before she could scream, I spoke, telling her I needed help, that I was lost. My voice sounded foreign to my own ears, as though someone else was using my mouth to form the words. She managed to open her car door, but I was quicker, my hand preventing her from closing it. I insisted she take me somewhere, anywhere. I needed to go with her, needed it with an intensity that frightened even me. The look in her eyes, raw terror mingled with determination, sent a thrill through my body that was both exhilarating and sickening. She maneuvered herself into the driver's seat and slammed the door. The locks engaged with an electronic chirp that echoed in the empty garage. I pounded on the window, my desperation mounting. I just wanted to talk, I told her. Just a conversation. My reflection in the window looked distorted, feral. Was that really my face? The harsh overhead lights cast strange shadows across my features, making me appear hollow-eyed and gaunt. She started the engine. I grabbed the door handle, yanking it with increasing fury. The car began to move, and I stumbled alongside it, unwilling to let go. Something inside me screamed that if she drove away, something terrible would happen. To her, to me, to everyone. As the car gained speed, a strange vibration began to emanate from within it. I could feel it through the handle, pulsing like a heartbeat. The windows began to fog, not from the outside, but with a strange greenish vapor from within. Her face behind the wheel appeared distorted, stretched in impossible ways. I finally released my grip and fell to my knees on the cold concrete. The sedan screeched around the corner, leaving me alone with the humming fluorescent lights. But as I watched it disappear, I noticed something that froze the blood in my veins. A dark, humanoid shape in the back seat that hadn't been there before. My head throbbed with sudden, excruciating pain. Visions flashed before my eyes, the woman's face contorted in terror, not because of me, but because of what was now in the car with her. Something ancient, something hungry. I staggered to my feet, bile rising in my throat. The garage seemed to shift around me, the concrete pillars bending at impossible angles. Had I truly seen something in her back seat, or was my mind finally breaking down completely? The security guard found me an hour later, curled up against a pillar, muttering incoherently. He assumed I was drunk or high, threatening to call the police if I didn't leave immediately. He couldn't understand when I tried to explain about the woman, about the thing that had gotten into her car, about how I'd been trying to warn her, not harm her. Days later, I saw her again. She was walking through the mall during daylight hours, smiling and carrying shopping bags. Relief flooded through me. She was safe. I approached her, ready to apologize, to explain my bizarre behavior that night. But when she turned to face me, something was wrong. Her smile remained fixed, her eyes empty and glassy. And for just a moment, in the reflection of a store window, I saw what was wearing her skin like a suit. A shadowy, elongated thing with too many limbs folded impossibly inside a human form. It nodded at me in recognition, and then I understood. It hadn't wanted her at all. It had been waiting for me. Now I sit in this sterile room, telling my story to doctors who exchange knowing glances. They don't believe me. They say I'm suffering from delusions, that I stalked an innocent woman and traumatized her. They've shown me security footage of that night, but it's been altered. In their version, I'm the monster, chasing her car with inhuman determination. But I know what I saw, and sometimes, when the medication wears off and the membrane between worlds thins again, I see the doctor's true forms too. I hear them discussing not my treatment but my preparation, and I wait, knowing what comes next. The ocean whispers secrets at night that it keeps silent during the day. I've always known this, but I never understood what those secrets were until that night on Henderson Beach. Some knowledge can't be unlearned, and some nights leave permanent shadows on your mind, even when you escape with your body intact. We thought we were alone on that stretch of forgotten coastline. 5 friends celebrating the end of our grueling final semester, the culmination of 4 years of academic struggle. The nearest town was miles away, and we had deliberately chosen this isolated spot to feel like the only people left in the world. The night was unusually dark. A new moon paired with heavy cloud cover had swallowed the stars. Our bonfire was the only light for miles, or so we believed. I remember checking my watch. 1:17 a.m. That's when Marcus pointed it out. A faint orange glow perhaps half a mile down the beach. At first, I argued it was just the reflection of our own fire on the wet sand. But as we all stared, the truth became undeniable. There was a second fire burning in the distance. It wasn't there earlier, Alicia said, her voice barely audible over the crash of waves. She was right. We had scanned the beach thoroughly when setting up our camp, searching for the perfect spot. No one had been there. The conversation shifted to theories. Maybe late-night fishermen, other students with the same idea as us, or locals who knew hidden access points to the beach. But something felt wrong. The fire remained completely stationary, with no visible movement around it, no shadows passing before the flames. no voices carried on the wind. "I'm going to check it out," I announced, ignoring the protests from my friends. Curiosity had always been my fatal flaw, according to my mother. I grabbed my phone for its flashlight and started walking. The sand dragged at my feet as I approached, each step requiring more effort than I expected. The air grew colder the further I moved from our fire, despite the mild spring night. My phone's flashlight seemed to dim with each yard of progress, the beam narrowing and weakening, as though something was draining its power. I began noticing things that triggered an instinctive unease. The waves had changed their rhythm, now crashing in sets of 3 rather than the natural randomness from before. The wind, which had been blowing steadily from the ocean, now seemed to shift direction constantly, sometimes pushing against my back, sometimes my face, sometimes spiraling around me like a miniature cyclone. As I drew closer, I could make out details around the mysterious fire. A small pile of clothing lay neatly folded on a towel, jeans, a red sweatshirt, and what looked like a university baseball cap. Next to them sat an open cooler, with bottles still glistening with condensation. Fresh footprints led from the fire toward the water's edge, then back, then scattered in multiple directions, as though someone had been pacing in confusion or panic. But there was nobody there. Nobody tending the fire, nobody swimming in the black water. I called out, my voice sounding flat and muffled in the heavy air. No response. I moved closer to the fire, noting how perfectly constructed it was, the logs arranged in a precise pyramid, burning with barely a flicker despite the erratic wind. It didn't sputter or crackle like a normal fire. It burned with an unnatural steadiness, the flames maintaining the exact same height and intensity. That's when I heard it, a single drawn-out scream from somewhere behind me, toward the water. Not a scream of excitement or surprise, but one of pure terror, cut short as though a hand had been clamped over the screamer's mouth. My skin erupted in goosebumps, and my heart began hammering against my ribs with such force I could feel my shirt moving. I spun around, sweeping my weakening flashlight across the water's surface. Nothing, just blackness and the rhythmic trio of waves. Then came the sound of feet slapping against wet sand, running, not toward me, but parallel to the shoreline, moving away from both fires. My mouth went desert dry as I called out again. The running footsteps stopped instantly. I strained my ears but heard only my own ragged breathing and the blood pulsing behind my eardrums. I took a step backward, then another, my eyes fixed on the point where I'd heard the running. That's when my foot touched something soft and warm. I looked down to find my shoe pressing into a handprint in the sand. A fresh handprint, the fingers slightly curled as if digging in. As I stared, water began seeping up through it, first clear, then tinged with something darker. I ran. Blind panic propelled me away from the second fire and back toward my friends. My feet seemed to barely touch the ground as adrenaline flooded my system. Halfway back, I risked a glance over my shoulder and witnessed something impossible. The second fire collapsed and extinguished in an instant, as though a giant invisible hand had smothered it completely. Darkness swallowed the beach behind me, and in that darkness, I heard footsteps again, multiple sets now, splashing through the shallow water, moving faster than humanly possible. I crashed into our campsite, gasping out fragmented warnings that made my friends exchange worried glances. They said I'd only been gone for 3 minutes, though it had felt like at least 20 to me. They claimed there had never been a second fire at all, that I'd walked toward nothing but darkness and returned in a state of inexplicable terror. As they tried to calm me, I noticed something that froze the blood in my veins. Among our scattered belongings around our fire lay a red sweatshirt and a university baseball cap that belonged to none of us, both dripping wet with seawater. I insisted we leave immediately. No one argued when they saw the absolute conviction of danger in my eyes. As we hastily packed our things, the fire we had built, our fire, began to change. The flames grew perfectly still, burning without flicker or sound, forming themselves into an exact pyramid. And somewhere in the darkness beyond, I heard the soft, deliberate sound of footprints circling our campsite, accompanied by the rhythmic crashing of waves in sets of 3. We left everything behind and ran to our cars. I've never returned to Henderson Beach, and I never will. But sometimes, when I'm falling asleep, I hear waves crashing in sets of 3 against my bedroom window, even though I now live 200 miles inland. And I know that whatever was on that beach that night is patient, and it remembers my face. The Grand Bellingham Hotel stood like a sentinel against the night sky, its Victorian architecture a relic of a more elegant era. Its marble lobby had witnessed decades of luxurious gatherings, secret affairs, and whispered promises. I didn't know it then, but some promises echo forever, trapped within those polished stone walls. The marketing conference had brought me to this historic hotel in the heart of downtown. After checking in, I marveled at the massive lobby, an expanse of pristine white marble that gleamed under ornate crystal chandeliers. The concierge mentioned the hotel's storied past while handling my reservation, how it had hosted diplomats and movie stars since the 1930s. What he failed to mention were the stories that wouldn't appear in brochures. My first night passed uneventfully. The second night, however, I woke suddenly at 1:58 a.m. My heart pounded for no apparent reason, my skin prickling with goosebumps, despite the room's comfortable temperature. Then I heard it, the distinct sound of high heels clicking rhythmically across marble. Click-clack, click-clack. The sound echoed with perfect clarity, as if someone were pacing the lobby directly below my third-floor room. I tried to ignore it, reasoning that perhaps another guest was a night owl, or maybe hotel staff were preparing for tomorrow. But the walking pattern seemed oddly deliberate. 10 steps in one direction, pause, turn, 10 steps back, over and over. After 20 minutes, my curiosity overcame my desire for sleep. The elevator hummed softly as it descended to the lobby. My stomach tightened with each floor we passed, an inexplicable anxiety building. When the door slid open, I stepped into silence. The vast marble expanse was completely empty, bathed in the dim glow of security lighting. The clicking had stopped the moment the elevator doors opened. I scanned the space, noting the antique furniture, the reception desk, unmanned at this hour, and the grand staircase. Nothing seemed out of place. Convinced I'd imagined the sounds, I returned to my room and eventually fell back asleep. The following night, the clicking returned precisely at 2 a.m., this time louder, more insistent. My mouth went dry as I lay rigid in bed, listening to the unnerving rhythm. 10 steps, pause, turn, 10 steps back. I pictured a woman in elegant attire pacing impatiently, waiting for someone. During breakfast, I casually asked the elderly waitress about strange occurrences in the hotel. Her hand trembled slightly as she refilled my coffee. Without meeting my eyes, she mentioned that old buildings often settle at night, creating unusual sounds. Her deliberate avoidance of my question only intensified my curiosity. That day, between conference sessions, I researched the hotel's history. Buried in newspaper archives, I found a small article from 1952 about a woman named Eleanor Blackwood who had been found unconscious in the lobby. She had died before reaching the hospital, the cause listed as heart failure. The article mentioned she had been waiting for her fiancé, who was supposed to meet her after returning from Europe. He never arrived. That night, I struggled to fall asleep, my mind replaying the article's details. At exactly 2 a.m., the clicking began again. My breathing quickened as I slipped out of bed and put on my robe. This time, I would see this through. The lobby was empty again, but the clicking continued, echoing throughout the space. I stood motionless by the elevator, my skin crawling with cold sweat. The sound circled the perimeter of the lobby, though I could see nothing. Then I noticed the grand entrance doors, their glass panels reflecting the interior of the lobby. And there she was. In the reflection, a tall, slender woman in a 1950s evening gown paced deliberately across the marble floor. Her face was partially obscured by styled blonde hair, but her posture communicated anxious anticipation. My heart hammered against my ribs as I slowly turned to face where she should have been, but the space was empty. When I looked back at the reflection, she had stopped pacing and was staring directly at me, her eyes hollow points of darkness in her pale face. The temperature plummeted. My breath clouded in front of me as I backed away. The woman in the reflection took a step toward me, her movement jerky and unnatural. I could now see her clearly, beautiful but gaunt, with an expression of desperate hope that slowly morphed into something darker as she registered my presence. I felt a pressure in my ears, as if the air itself were being compressed. The chandelier above began to sway slightly, crystal pendants tinkling. A whisper seemed to emanate from everywhere and nowhere. "Is he coming? Have you seen him?" My legs threatened to buckle as I backed toward the elevator. In the reflection, she followed, though the space beside me remained empty. I pressed the elevator button repeatedly, my fingers shaking violently. The doors finally opened, and I stumbled inside. As the doors began to close, I heard a high-pitched wail of anguish that made my vision blur. Through the narrowing gap, I glimpsed not the empty lobby, but a crowded scene from decades past. Elegant guests in vintage attire, music playing, and at the center, the woman in the evening gown, checking her watch anxiously. I spent the remainder of the night huddled in my room, lights blazing. At dawn, I requested a room change, citing plumbing issues rather than revealing the truth. The desk clerk assigned me to a room on the opposite wing, far from the marble lobby. That afternoon, I located a retired bellhop mentioned in one of the articles. When I described what I'd seen, his weathered face grew somber. He explained that Eleanor Blackwood had been waiting for her fiancé, who had promised to meet her in the lobby upon his return. She had received a telegram earlier that day, but had told no one its contents. She paced that lobby for hours in her finest dress, checking the entrance repeatedly. The hotel staff had assumed she'd been stood up. The truth emerged days later. Her fiancé's plane had crashed over the Atlantic. The telegram had informed her of his death. The bellhop believed she had died of heartbreak, but rumors persisted of suicide by poison. Either way, for decades after, guests and staff reported the sound of heels on marble at 2 a.m., the time his plane was scheduled to arrive. My final night at the hotel, I stayed awake past 2 a.m., my room far from the lobby, but my thoughts still trapped there. As I finally drifted toward sleep, my phone lit up with a notification. A text message from an unknown number displayed just 4 words. "He's still not here." I checked out at first light, my hands trembling as I handed over my room key. As I waited for my taxi outside, I glanced back at the hotel entrance. Through the glass doors, I could see the reflection of the marble lobby, and for just a moment, the silhouette of a woman standing perfectly still, watching me leave.